Simon Peter and Thomas and Nathanael and the brothers Zebedee and two other disciples were together. And Simon Peter announced, "I'm going fishing." And they fished all night. And when the sun came up, Jesus was standing on the beach, but they did not recognize him. They were still in the boat, and Jesus, the risen Christ, spoke to them from the shore. "Good morning. Did you catch anything for breakfast?" And they answered, "No." And he said, "Throw the net off the right side of the boat to see what happens." So they did what he said. And all of a sudden, there were so many fish in it, they weren't strong enough to pull it in. And then something clicked in them. A memory opened up. And the disciple that Jesus loved said to Peter, "It's the Master." So they headed for the shore, pulling along a net full of fish. And when they got out of the boat, they saw a fire laid with fish and bread cooking on it. And Jesus said, "Breakfast is ready. Bring some of the fish that you've caught." And not one of the disciples dared to ask, "Who are you?" For they knew it was the Master. So picture yourself on that beach. You're tired after a long night of work. Smell the morning air coming off the sea. The sun just beginning to rise. Slight breeze coming in from the sea. Jesus sitting by the fire. See him. See him see you. Hear him call you by name. And hear him ask, "And what do you bring to breakfast today? What have you caught? What have you experienced? What has been given to you the past few days as a gift? What do you bring to breakfast today?" Name 3 things in your mind for which you are grateful in the past few days. Can begin with a bit of humor. There it is. I don't know whose hair is funnier, mine or my wife's, but that was about 35 years ago or so. And I bring that picture not to show you what a devastatingly beautiful couple we were, but because preparing for this conjured up a memory. And the memory is that I began to pray a form of the Examen before I knew that word, before I understood where the idea came from. And when I was a young married person, I had a lot of insecurities. We got married very young. So I would have these insecurities. Does she really love me? I would have these insecurities. Am I doing okay at work? And I would lay in bed at night worried until I made myself step through my day a little bit at a time and begin to ask questions like, well, how is it between me and Sue today? And I would think about that. And I'd say, okay, I think that's okay. So what's bothering me? So I'd say, well, how did it go at work today? And I would work my way through that, and I'd think, oh, that one thing that happened at that meeting, that was really kind of unsettling. Or I'd say, how was it between me and God today? And I would begin to think, I could have done better. Or, well, that one moment, that was really special, right? This idea of the examen that we all know so well, you know, teaching a room of people like you who pray the examen and who know the examen is hard in some ways, because you all know this as well as I do. And I've learned from many of you here even more. And yet, the examen is our work of paying attention and being open, of connecting the simple facts of our lives with a greater sense of purpose, of recognizing the little things that happen to us and piecing them together into the bigger whole, of finding God in the things of the earth, of finding God in the things of our lives and the people around us. It's hard, but it takes intention. It's hard, but it's our work. It is the examined life. It is a life examined through the lens of God, of trying very hard to see as God sees us. It is both examining and being examined, and knowing that we are being examined. It is, as Mary Elliott says in her beautiful poem, The Messenger, it is what matters. It is my work, which is mostly standing still and learning to be astonished. Can we learn that? When I think back on my retreat, my Bridges retreat, this was at the center of everything that I learned. If someone said, what did you learn from Bridges? What's your takeaway from Bridges? I would say the examen and the susape. Now, there's a lot in between those two things, right, that I learned and that are really important. But those are the things for me that have lasted. The opposite of the daily examen is living what Socrates called the unexamined life. And he said it was not worth living. Not paying close enough attention to what's going around us. Refusing to be aware of the blessings and the presence of God in our lives. Not being willing to be astonished. These could be some of the direst temptations we face. If we give up on those things, then as Father Arupe wrote, what gets us out of the bed in the morning? After all, we've seen it all, we think. And we're all, most of us in this room, a little bit older anyway. Some of us are a little bit younger than older, but you know, we're all, none of us are, you know, getting any younger. And sometimes we think we have seen it all, so why bother to pay attention? There's nothing new under the sun. Another day is just another day, is just another day. Until we watch for something that makes it a little different. So we settle into life. We get a little lazy. We yawn at the sunsets instead of being astounded by it. We blink through the beauty of a garden and a field instead of standing in awe of it. We ho-hum our way through all that we have learned to take for ordinary and deserved. That's another big one. Well, I deserve this. It's no gift. So a meal that we paid for by God becomes sustenance instead of a small daily feast. The family visit becomes perfunctory instead of a blessing. A work of art becomes decoration, mindless entertainment, instead of maybe a glimpse of God. Without this attention, without our presence, without our purpose in doing this, we risk allowing life and the presence of God in it to sweep over our heads virtually unnoticed. We live without gratitude, not because we're not grateful, not because we don't want to say thank you, but because we forget. And we get so caught up in the daily ordinariness of life that we miss the stuff for which we have every reason to be grateful. So it's for this reason that the Examen becomes an important daily prayer and practice for so many of us. It grounds us. It's a prayer that focuses us and forces us to slow down and pay attention and say thank you. It's a prayer that Ignatius said we should pray every day, even if we have time for nothing else, for no other kind of prayer. So as we all know, a lot of times we talk about the Examen as being something we pray near the end of the day, an invitation to look back over our day and discover where we may have encountered God. It's an examination of our consciousness, of our awareness, a chance to review our day and take notice of what's happened to us in our interactions with others and with the world. It's a chance before the day slips away to recall where we just may have encountered God. When we don't stop to do this, we just miss the blessings. We go over our heads, we operate on autopilot, and we just don't see, and we don't know. But when we stop and pay attention, we begin to live lives of gratitude. Because we can't say thank you for something that we're not aware of. The story I love to tell about this happened when our kids were younger, and we would occasionally, to try to keep them kind of happy and engaged on a long car ride, we play this game called Count 10 Birds. And we'd be driving along, and the idea would just be that simple. Who can count 10 birds first? And they would look, or if you really get brave and it's a really long ride, let's count 50 birds, right? And they would do that, and they would say, oh, there's one. Oh, there's one. Oh, there's 5 of them in that tree over there, So the point of that, I learned many years later, was that if I wouldn't have said, let's count 10 birds, they wouldn't have seen any birds. If we don't stop and count our blessings and name them one by one, as that old hymn says, we will find none. So the Examen is more than just rewinding the videotapes of our lives, more than just reliving our time in our mind's eye, although that is where it begins. In Margaret Silf's book, Inner Compass, which my group has been studying this year, she talks about using the Examen to track our moods and our orientations toward God or away from God, our consolations or our desolations. We begin to see patterns. She describes the work of the Examen as replaying the time under review prayerfully and allowing the dominant moods of that period to surface again. So not just replaying it, but replaying it prayerfully, of replaying it through that lens of God's eye. And she suggests that we allow God to lead us into the real roots of the feelings and the emotions that bubble up during that time. We track our moods to discover deeper movements, deeper desires, deeper unease, deeper dis-ease, deeper moments of consolation and desolation. If we felt rage, or we felt apprehension, or we felt utter joy, we need to do the hard work of prayerfully considering where those feelings came from. Can we put a name on it? She refers to the Examen as her day with God and asks two basic questions. Where was God today, and how was God today? Father Tetlow asked a similar question when describing the Examen. How do things stand between me and God? It's that same question 20-year-old Steve asked. How do things stand between me and God today? How do things stand between me and my spouse, between me and my coworkers, between me and my friends, between me and my children? We all know the steps of the Examen, and they can be done in lots of different ways. They can be as simple as those 5 steps that are laid out for us in so many ways. Father Mark Thibodeau, in his more recent book, Reimagining the Examen, and there's an app that goes with this, if you're not familiar with this yet, called the same thing. He gives us a plethora of different ways to examine our consciousness. Every day you can open his app and take a different swat at it, an Examen to help us think about our relationships, an Examen to help us think about nature, the Examen that helps us think about how it is between us and God. Lots of different ways. So it's a great resource if you're not aware of it. The book or the app. So the Examen is an invitation to the graced experiences of finding the extraordinary and the holy in the midst of our ordinary and our mundane moments of our lives. Rabbi Harold Kushner once said, "Can you see the holiness in those things that you take for granted? A paved road, a washing machine? If you concentrate on finding what is good in every situation, you will discover that your life will suddenly be filled with gratitude, a feeling that nurtures the soul." Or my friend, songwriter Carrie Newcomer, "Holy is the dish and drain, the soap and sink and the cup and plate, warm wool socks and cold white tile, shower heads and good dry towels, and frying eggs that sound like psalms, with a bit of salt measured in my palm. It's all a part of a sacrament, as holy as a day is spent." The Examen is a prayer that shapes our entire day if we do it right, not just a review of our day. It's a prayer that asks not only how did my day go, but also in the morning, how should I begin this day? And perhaps at midday, how am I doing so far? It's a prayer that ultimately leads us to ask questions that frame and anchor our day. Questions like, can I greet this day with expectation, a sense of wonder and surprise? Can I begin my day with gratitude for the blessings and opportunities in my life? Can I live each day available to those around me? These 3 things frame our day: expectation, gratitude, and availability. There may be days when we just don't want to get out of bed. We don't want to get anything done. We don't want to be creative. We don't want to be responsive to our gifts. But the choice is ours. We can get out of bed and say, "What have you got for me today?" It's my favorite prayer. What have you got for me today, God? What is it that you want me to do today? Gratitude, which we've already talked about quite a bit, but akin to living in expectation is this idea of living in gratitude, to awake each day with a thank you on our lips instead of to wake every day with it's another day instead of it's another day. There's a difference there, right? And availability. All this expectation and gratitude's got to lead us somewhere. And the more we become available and aware of God living and working in us, the more we become aware of our blessings and the possibilities of each day, the more we become willing to ask, am I open to all this? What am I going to do with all this? Am I more willing today than I was yesterday to be more available to the people in my life? To the people I meet that I don't even know? Am I willing to forego comfort and convenience and a legalistic adherence to my life, my schedule, my sacrosanct beliefs in order that I might be a little more available to others? I gave an earlier version of this talk a few years ago here, actually up in the church. And at the end of that talk, at the end of 2019, we all know now what was coming, I said, and I went back and looked at my notes, 2020 will be another year of challenge. Another year of unrest, maybe. Another year of great change in the world. But how could we, any of us, have imagined just how challenging, just how unrestful, just how changing it would be for all of us? And yet here we are. And hopefully we are here still with the knowledge and faith that our unchanging God has not moved. Hopefully we have been paying attention and we have found that to be true. We have examined our lives and found God still present. And so we get to control how we respond, how we choose the day before us. And these days, in sum, make up our lives. Days make up lives. One by one, we live them, and soon enough, they are done. We can awake in anger or in confusion, or we can choose to arise with a song of surprise and gratitude ready to be sung out to the world. We get to choose, and the daily Examen helps us keep our choices in line with God's will and with our authentic purpose, our principle and foundation. The Examined Life changes everything.
It's an ordinary time on an ordinary day. It's the simple things we do that take our breath away. And the more we pay attention to every day that fills our eyes, the more we live extraordinary lives. One day I stood out by the road, and beyond my fields the river flowed. Gold stalks shimmered in the light, my soul on fire, my mind in flight. It was just one moment in the sun, a reckoning when day was done, a time to stand and be amazed, for we spend our lives as we spend our days. It's an ordinary time on an ordinary day. It's the simple things we do that take our breath away. And the more we pay attention to every day that fills our eyes, the more we live extraordinary lives. When we look ahead, say someday soon. When we wring our hands and count the moons. When we fret the sands in the hourglass, we can miss the days that become our past. So with the sun each day I rise, my only prayer to be surprised by the beauty that the world displays. For we spend our lives as we spend our days. It's an ordinary time on an ordinary day. It's the simple things we do that take our breath away. And the more we pay attention to every day that fills our eyes, the more we live extraordinary lives. It's an ordinary time on an ordinary day. It's the simple things we do that take our breath away.